All right, so you're ready for a deep dive, huh? This time, we're tackling Fyodor Dostoevsky.
Oh, yeah. This one's going to be intense.
Definitely. And that means diving into 19th century Russia, a time of social and political upheaval.
Yeah. Imagine all that simmering tension and whispers of revolution in the air.
You could practically feel it, right? Okay, so we've got all these YouTube videos about his life and his books. And
it's a lot.
It is. But our mission here, and I think it's a good one, is to uncover why Dostoevsky is considered such a powerful writer.
Yeah, like what made him so different? Why do we still care what he thought about life over a century later?
Exactly. So let's start with the man himself. Dostoevsky was born in Moscow in 1821.
And get this, he actually began his studies in military engineering.
Military engineering. Can you imagine?
It makes you wonder, how that early training might have influenced his writing.
That's a great point. Maybe that structured analytical thinking is what gave him that incredible psychological depth with his characters.
It's possible, but there's this one event that really shaped his path. I mean, talk about a life-altering experience.
1849, right? Arrested, sentenced to death for being involved with that revolutionary circle.
Can you imagine facing your own mortality like that?
It must have been a turning point.
Absolutely. And even though his sentence was commuted to hard labor in Siberia, that brush with death completely reshaped his worldview.
It's like Siberia wasn't just exile for him. It was like a crash course in the meaning of life.
It was a crucible where all those powerful themes, freedom, suffering, redemption, were forged.
And those themes, they became the backbone of his writing. Let's talk about some of those works. Let's start with Notes from Underground from 1864.
Oh, yes, the infamous Underground Man. Talk about a character consumed by alienation.
And existential angst. Not your typical happy-go-lucky hero.
Not at all. This novel really goes deep into the darkest corners of the human psyche, and that stream of consciousness style, wow.
It's like he's peeling back the layers of the human mind and exposing all those contradictions we try to hide.
Yeah, like the Underground Man, he desires freedom, but then he's also terrified of it.
And he chooses suffering, almost like he's sabotaging himself, just to prove he has free will.
It's fascinating, isn't it? Like, Dostoevsky was already exploring these psychological complexities way before psychology was even a formal field.
He was ahead of his time. Have you ever felt that pull, that urge to act against your own best interests?
I think we all have at some point. It's part of being human, isn't it? That inner struggle.
It's like he's holding up a mirror to human nature, showing us all the messy bits we might not want to see. Okay, so 2 years later, he publishes Crime and Punishment.
Here we've got Raskolnikov, this student who justifies murder with this twisted idea that he's an extraordinary man.
Above conventional morality.
Right. And the novel is just a masterclass in psychological tension. You see Raskolnikov grappling with guilt.
And that crumbling illusion of his own superiority.
It's about the weight of our choices and the possibility of redemption even after committing a terrible act.
And what about Sonia, a young woman forced into prostitution? She becomes this symbol of redemption amidst all the dark.
It's like Dostoevsky is showing us that even in the most hopeless situations, there's still potential for transformation, for hope.
And then we can't forget the brothers Karamazov.
A dysfunctional family drama for the ages.
Right. A father and his 3 sons, each embodying different aspects of human nature. Dmitri driven by passion, Ivan the skeptical intellectual, and Alyosha representing faith and compassion.
The brothers Karamazov just throws you right into this whirlwind of philosophical and moral dilemmas, the battle between faith and doubt.
The nature of freedom, the consequences of nihilism, it's all there.
And who could forget Ivan's famous line, "If God does not exist, everything is permitted." Chilling.
It is, but it's so thought-provoking, isn't it?
Huh.
And that's what's so brilliant about Dostoevsky. He doesn't preach.
He presents these ideas, these struggles, and lets you draw your own conclusions.
He makes you confront uncomfortable truths about yourself and humanity as a whole. And that's probably why his work still resonates so strongly today.
Absolutely. He leaves you with more questions than answers, prompting you to ask, what does this mean for me?
So as we wrap up part 1 of this deep dive, here's something to think about. Do you see suffering as a curse, or could it be an opportunity for growth?
And are you willing to confront your own shadow, those parts of yourself you might prefer to...
We'll be back in part 2 to dive even deeper into Dostoevsky's life and explore how his experiences shaped his unique perspective on the human condition.
Stay tuned. This is just the beginning.
Okay, so we've touched on some of Dostoevsky's big works.
Crime and Punishment, Notes from the Underground, the brothers Karamazov.
Right, but I keep thinking about how his own life experiences, especially that near-death experience in 1849, fueled these intense themes.
Oh, absolutely. Being arrested, sentenced to death, and suddenly sent to hard labor in Siberia.
It's hard to even imagine.
He actually wrote about it in a letter, He described how facing his own mortality made him see everything differently.
Like with this new intensity.
Yeah. Even the simplest things felt miraculous to him.
It's like he was given a second chance and it totally rewired him.
Exactly. That brush with death solidified his belief that life, even with all its pain and uncertainty, is precious.
And that idea just permeates his writing, right?
Totally. Think about his characters, like Raskolnikov in Crime and Punishment. He commits this awful crime, but then through his guilt and suffering, he eventually finds redemption.
It's like Dostoevsky is saying that even in the darkest moments, there's still potential for growth.
That's a key takeaway, isn't it? Suffering isn't something to be avoided. It's something to be embraced.
Like it's through those tough experiences that we really come to understand ourselves and the world around us.
On a deeper level, yeah. And this ties into another big theme in his work, freedom.
But for Dostoevsky, it wasn't just about external circumstances, was it?
No, not at all. He saw true freedom as this internal state.
Like a state of mind?
Right. It's about confronting your own inner demons, those darker impulses we all have.
So it's not about escaping prison walls, but the mental and emotional prisons we create for ourselves.
Exactly. Think about the underground man. He's free from external constraint, but he's trapped by his own self-destructive thoughts and behaviors.
And he even argues that this kind of freedom can be a burden.
Because it means we're responsible for our choices and the consequences that come with them.
We can't blame society or fate. It's all on us.
Which is a pretty challenging idea, right? That true freedom comes with this weight of responsibility.
It is. Have you seen examples of this struggle in your own life and stuff you've been looking at?
Oh, it's definitely something to think about. And, this exploration of freedom leads us to another big theme in Dostoevsky's work, redemption.
Okay, so we've got suffering, freedom, and now redemption.
The trifecta.
But how did Dostoevsky view redemption? Was it about good deeds, following a set of rules?
Not really. For him, redemption came from deep internal transformation.
So it's more about acknowledging your own darkness and then actively choosing to move towards the light.
Exactly. And this journey towards redemption often goes hand in hand with suffering.
It's like they're two sides of the same coin.
Think about Sonia in Crime and Punishment. She's surrounded by darkness, forced into a life she didn't choose, but she never loses her faith or compassion.
She's the one who becomes a source of redemption for Raskolnikov,
showing him that even in the depths of despair, there's still hope.
And what about Alyosha in The Brothers Karamazov? Surrounded by all that family dysfunction, yet choosing this life of faith and compassion.
It seems like Dostoevsky believed everyone, regardless of their past, has the potential for redemption.
It's a powerful message for sure. And what's so compelling is that he explores these themes, not through some dry philosophical treatise.
Yeah, not a text.
But through these relatable characters, these stories that draw you in.
He wasn't afraid to show the messiness of human existence.
The struggles, the contradictions, the moments of grace.
And in doing so, he reminds us that we're not alone in those struggles.
It's like he's saying, look, life is tough. We're all flawed. But even in the darkness, there's beauty and hope and the possibility of redemption.
And that message transcends time and culture. That's what makes Dostoevsky a writer who truly understood the human experience.
He didn't sugarcoat things. He challenged us to face life's complexities head on.
And to find meaning even in the midst of suffering.
Okay, so we've talked about Dostoevsky's crazy life.
Yeah, and those big themes like suffering and redemption.
But it feels like we've only scratched the surface.
Oh, for sure. There's so much more to uncover. Like, what about his exploration of faith and doubt?
Right. We know he was a man of faith, but he didn't shy away from those tough questions.
Not at all. And that tension between faith and doubt plays out in so many of his works.
Like with Ivan Karamazov, right?
Exactly. He's brilliant, but he just rejects the idea of God, can't reconcile it with all the suffering in the world, especially the suffering of innocent children.
And that famous line of his, if God does not exist, everything is permitted. Gives me chills every time.
It really captures that nihilistic viewpoint that Dostoevsky was wrestling with, but I don't think he was trying to push traditional religious beliefs.
So it was more nuanced than that.
Oh yeah, much more. He wasn't about easy answers or dogma. He just presented those struggles of faith so honestly.
And then there's Alyosha. He represents a different kind of faith. Right?
Totally. More compassionate, more hopeful. He doesn't have all the answers, but he still chooses to believe in goodness, even with all the dark.
It's like Dostoevsky is showing us that faith is a journey, not a destination. It's about choosing to believe in something bigger than yourself, even when you have doubt.
And that resonates with so many people, regardless of their personal beliefs.
Yeah, that search for meaning, those big existential questions, we all grapple with them.
Exactly. Okay, so before we wrap up, I want to touch on that concept of the double you mentioned.
Oh yeah, what was that all about?
Okay, so imagine you catch your reflection, and for a second you don't recognize yourself. It's kind of unsettling, right?
A little bit, yeah.
Well, Dostoevsky takes that feeling and amps it up. He uses the double to explore those hidden parts of ourselves.
This is stuff we might not want to see.
Exactly. It's like encountering this mirror image, but it's reflecting all the things we try to keep hidden. The darker impulses, the shadow side.
Okay, so is it like a battle between good and evil?
It's more about the complexity and contradictions within each of us. Like, think about Raskolnikov and his extraordinary man philosophy. Is that a double emerging, his shadow self taking over?
Whoa.
Yeah.
Okay, that is deep.
Right. It's not just about good versus evil. It's about recognizing that we all have these shadow selves.
And maybe confronting those shadows, acknowledging those darker impulses, is part of achieving true freedom.
And ultimately moving towards redemption. It all ties together.
It does, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So, as we wrap up our Dostoevsky deep dive, what are some things you hope our listeners will take away?
Well, first, I hope they appreciate Dostoevsky's willingness to tackle those big questions. Life, death, suffering, the search for meaning. He didn't give us easy answers.
But he made us think.
Right. And he reminded us that suffering can actually be a catalyst for growth and transformation.
And ultimately, redemption. It's not something to be afraid of.
And maybe most importantly, I hope they come away with a sense of Dostoevsky's deep understanding of the heart.
All its messiness and complexities and contradictions.
Exactly. And that capacity for both darkness and...
It's amazing how his novels, written over a century ago, still speak to us today. Those insights into human nature are timeless.
You really are. It's been great exploring these ideas.
And with you, dear listener, we hope this deep dive has inspired you to delve deeper into Dostoevsky's.
And keep asking those big questions about life and what it all means.
Keep seeking, keep questioning, and keep diving deep.